Where the air is more rarefied. A brief look at high culture in Japan today through foreign eyes. Lifting our eyes from the low to the high. When hearing the words Japanese culture, the first thing to leap to mind for the average foreigner, especially a younger person, might be contemporary pop culture, anime and manga, science fiction, romance stories, video games, J-pop, street fashions, what has come to be known as cool Japan. For many, the idea of high culture in the forms of older works of art can feel intimidating, dry, stuffy, or academic. Of course, expertise in high culture exists primarily in the realm of experts and academics, but it also has an important place in the lives of ordinary people. Throughout the world, museums are still packed with tourists, as are historical sites, while classical music and dance events still draw significant crowds in most nations. What can we learn from a quick look at foreign ideas about traditional Japanese culture? Still alive, still lively. The first important thing to understand about traditional culture in Japan and other nations is that it is not something that is dead. It lives on in every small temple or shrine tucked away in a village or suburb, in local galleries, and in the large crowds in places like Ueno Park museums and attractions, which have recently seen annual visitor numbers surpassing 10 million, a high figure by any standard. In the US and Great Britain, the sales of paper and ink books are up, with a 10% rise this year in the latter nation. This trend has surprised many people who thought that printed books were in terminal decline. While I could not find similar figures for Japan, often people here say they prefer the nostalgic feel of paper when they read, in addition to absorbing digital media. It's something I grew up with doing, and while I like reading on the computer too, a book sometimes just feels more comfortable, said one Japanese man in his late 40s. His friend from New Zealand nodded in agreement. From canvas paintings to paperback books, traditional media and culture are still hanging in there. Clichés and identities. For this article, I spoke with several tourists from North America, China, and Europe, and asked them what came to mind when they thought of traditional Japanese culture. The answers were fairly predictable and included kimonos, ukiyo-e prints, samurai, the minimalism of Zen aesthetics, and rickshaws. This is a fairly cliched list, and as a long-term foreigner, I had to groan inwardly a bit in exasperation. Privately, many Japanese friends have told me they are tired of hearing about these things from foreigners too, and wished people took more interest in other aspects of Japan's incredibly long and rich cultural heritage. But all of us must learn to be patient with the limited and superficial understandings of outsiders. Foreigners, too, often feel trapped by cliches about their own traditional cultures. Tulips, windmills, and wooden shoes, laughed a man from Holland. That's all I ever hear when I tell people I'm Dutch. A Russian woman said, "We don't all wear fur hats, you know." Wherever we are from, we must always remind ourselves that outsiders can't possibly achieve a truly nuanced understanding unless they have lived in our countries for a long time or studied them carefully. New surprises from the old days. Once foreigners learn a little more about Japan, what interests them about tradition here? The answers I received differed wildly from person to person, of course, but revealed, to my relief, a bit more nuance. One woman from New Zealand's hobby was dyeing cloth in a very specific style, practiced only in a single city in Japan. She wouldn't tell me where, unfortunately. An American friend loves Meiji-era steam trains and collects photos and models of them. Roof tiles, was the curt answer provided by an Indian man. I can tell you almost to the year when an old building was made by looking at the tiles. A common factor was an appreciation for the profundity of traditional Japanese arts, dealing with crafts like woodworking, pottery, lacquer, and so forth. Many foreigners admire the extremely complex systems of connoisseurship, tight master-student ties passed down through highly specialized lineages, and extreme attention to detail when making objects like pottery or metalwork. The Japanese ideal of shokunin katagi can be seen in such attitudes of traditional culture, and it is also alive and well today in first-rate Japanese goods and services. Many foreigners I have spoken with over the years have expressed a particularly strong recognition of this quality as something distinctively Japanese. Lesser-known corners. What about literature and the performing arts? While many foreigners are aware of these areas of traditional Japanese culture, my own impression is that they tend to know less about them, unless they are experts or have made a special effort to devote themselves to these topics. Knowledge of literature is often limited by what has been widely translated into English. A quick list of some of the more well-known works and authors among foreigners might start with the Kojiki, Nihon Shoki, and Manyoshu at the ancient end, difficult works that few have actually read, and then make a quick stop in the Heian period with the Genji Monogatari and Sei Shonagon's Pillow Book. The list then skips many centuries before picking up again with authors like Yasunari Kawabata, Shusaku Endo, Kenzaburo Oe, Osamu Dazai, and Yukio Mishima, before finishing up with Haruki Murakami, perhaps the most globally famous contemporary Japanese writer. Not a very long list, to be sure, but better than nothing. Even less is known about No and Kabuki drama, except for the fact that they exist. But few foreigners I spoke with could name specific titles. Well, we can't expect everyone to know everything, can we? The future of the past. I used to worry that traditional Japanese culture would die out in a wave of electronic modernity, because I, too, love old things. But today, I am fairly confident it will survive long into the future. The U.S. author Ray Bradbury once wrote that books have pores, meaning that you could capture details and subtleties about life through writing that were impossible to see on, say, a modern TV screen, where faces are often moving too quickly or have been heavily altered to obscure the pores and wrinkles. I feel the same way about traditional culture, Japanese and otherwise, as compared with pop culture. The very fact that a thing is old and has survived gives it depth and complexity, pores, if you will, that go beyond freshly made new things, however attractive they may be. There seems to be a human hunger to see these pores in ancient things, to experience with your own senses things that many generations of people have known. The feeling of connecting with something traditional can lift us from the routines of our daily lives and show us, even if just for a moment, the awesome scope and broad sweep of history, making us feel part of something larger than ourselves. As long as human beings cherish this feeling, we will revere, respect, and show interest in what is traditional, even if, as outsiders, our grasp may be a little distorted or superficial at first.